This is the second part of a multi-part series on stress. If you missed the first part, check it out. It's absolutely not necessary to get something worthwhile out of this, part 2, but it can be helpful. Today, we are focusing on thinking errors and how to use them to help you out. If you're new to my videos, welcome. I'm Chelsy Castro, lawyer turned psychotherapist on a mission to help you work, live, and feel better. So let's dive right in. In the previous video, we covered what stress actually is and why you should not be trying to eliminate it. I also asked you to take note of how your mind and body respond to stressors. Did you notice any patterns? An awareness of our stress triggers and how we tend to respond to stressors is helpful in managing our stress, because the earlier we catch ourselves in the stress response, the more likely we are to choose coping mechanisms that are helpful to us instead of harmful. Today, we are focusing on those thoughts that accompany the stress responses you noticed. Studies have found that about 50,000 thoughts per day is what we have. 90% of those thoughts are beneath conscious awareness, and 98% of the thoughts are the same thoughts as yesterday, and then 80% of the thoughts tend to be negative. It's those negative thoughts that are really likely to show up and take us from a natural biological response to a stressor to an extended stressed out state, or chronic stress, or frankly that what we talk about stress in common conversation. Many of the types of thoughts are likely to be more based on emotion than on reality or logic. That's where thinking errors come in. You see, thoughts are not facts. I'll say it again. Thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are a combination of both our past and present experiences. The subconscious rules and assumptions that our brains naturally develop about ourselves, the world, our roles in the world as we are growing up result in a narrative. It's what we hear when we talk to ourselves, whether we are aware of it or not. This means that what the world has told us through both words and actions, or lack thereof in some cases, translates into thoughts we have today. As such, our thoughts are not just based on the so-called facts before us. They are much more complex than that. The problem arises when we believe these thoughts to be facts and then act on them as if they are fact without any questioning whatsoever. This is problematic because acting as such means that we are often not responding to in the most helpful way possible for the situation before us. In the context of our conversation here today, that means that we are responding to a stressor based on thoughts that may be disparate from the actual stressor before us. For example, if I do not complete an assignment perfectly, I will never be successful. You might not say this to yourself outright, and you can clearly see the failure in that logic right now as we're in this, but I'm willing to bet that my perfectionists out there are very familiar with that experience. If you believe and act on such a thought without taking the time to question its validity, it is likely that you will either sacrifice other priorities such as other deadlines or even that deadline, relationships and other work, and your well-being in order to make that assignment perfect. And let's face it, perfect is not really a thing, and when you're striving for it, you do your best, but it's not necessarily a good investment of your time and effort. Alternatively, you might severely procrastinate on the assignment or not even do it at all for fear of failure. Okay, so what am I talking about when I use the label thinking errors? Have you heard of the term maybe jumping to conclusions? Well, jumping to conclusions is a type of thinking error. For example, we jump to conclusions when we assume that we know what someone else is thinking and when we make predictions about what will happen in the future. Other types of thinking errors include polarized, or also known as black and white thinking. This involves seeing only one extreme or the other. You are right or wrong, good or bad, etc. There's no gray area. Number 2, applying a mental filter. This involves filtering in and filtering out a process, focusing only one part and ignoring on the rest. Usually this means only looking at negative parts of a situation and forgetting the positive parts altogether. Number 3, shoulding and musting. Sometimes you could say I should or I must, and you put an unreasonable demand or pressure on yourself and others. Sometimes such statements can be helpful, but they can also sometimes create unrealistic expectations which are unhelpful. Number 4, catastrophizing. Catastrophizing occurs when we blow things out of proportion. We view a situation as awful, dreadful, horrible, even though the facts don't support this. 5, labeling. We label ourselves and others and make global statements based on the behavior in specific situations. We tend to use this label even though there are many more examples that aren't consistent with this label. Number 6, magnification and minimization. You magnify positive attributes of other people and minimize your own attributes. 7, reward fallacy. You believe your sacrifice will always pay off. 8, you're always right. You believe that you're always right and often put other people on trial to prove that your thoughts and your actions are the correct ones. You even go into extreme lengths to demonstrate rightness. Number 9, fallacy of change. You expect others to change to accommodate you, and you believe that you can make them change. Changing them is important to you because you view yourself as dependent on them. 10, you either believe other people are responsible for your emotions or you blame yourself for every problem when circumstances are logically out of your control. Now, I will admit that this stuff can be hard to hear and wrap your mind around, frankly. Essentially, what I'm asking you to do here is to consider challenging the way you have been thinking for pretty much your entire life. I am asking you to raise awareness around your own thinking. Not an easy to do, but it is doable. So let's keep things simple. Take today's list of thinking errors and try to see if any of them could have been at play in the stress responses you experienced since the last video. Also, keep up the work you started with the last video in noting your stressors and your mind and body responses to them. However, this time, also try to see if any of the thinking errors on this list might be at play. We're still just data gathering and raising awareness, but it is all helpful in developing the skills that will enable you to respond to stressors by making more helpful instead of harmful decisions. This video was a little longer than usual, so that's it for now. Until next time, take care.